My business is just knife making, but primarily it's bringing people in, showing them about the process. So I offer classes in knife making, anything from very short and sweet, family, groups, everybody like that comes in. And apart from that, of course, I make custom knives and do all things metal. and kind of once I got from, this was just for fun, making crap products essentially that I just thought were cool, to making a little bit of a better product until right after I graduated. So I graduated that May, and then I went on the show and filmed in September. I ended up coming in second. Otherwise, I probably would have won, but you can make that decision for yourself.
Welcome to the Built Here podcast, where we tell the stories of entrepreneurs and business owners across Northeast Georgia. Our goal is to give small businesses, their owners and operators, a platform to be able to tell the stories of hard work and dedication that goes into building a small business. From the sleepless nights, wondering, is this thing even going to make it? To the best of days. Our goal is to give small business owners and operators and entrepreneurs in the Northeast Georgia mountains a platform to be able to tell their stories. The Built Here podcast is a production of Aramos Visuals. Aramos Visuals is Northeast Georgia's premium content creation partner. Here at Aramos Visuals, our goal is to tell real stories of real people in real places, which is what brings us to today's show. Hope you enjoy. Welcome to the Built Here podcast. We're telling stories of local business owners in Northeast Georgia, the North Georgia mountains, parts of Western North Carolina probably. And really our goal here is to talk about entrepreneurship, business, what life in a small town is like, what running a business in a small town is like, and kind of everything related to that. So come along with us. Today we are talking to Caleb Ledford with Ledford Works. He was a finalist on History Channel show Forged in Fire.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Well, welcome. We'll kind of jump into your origin a little bit, how you got into the whole blacksmithing, knife making world, and kind of what that looked like for you. Give us like a quick version, and then we'll hit some details later on.
Yeah, so essentially my business is just knife making, but primarily it's bringing people in, showing them about the process. So I offer classes in knife making, anything from very short and sweet, family, groups, everybody like that comes in, all the way up to more advanced classes where people who are just trying to advance in the process of knife making, kind of like a mastermind, can come in, learn more about the process where they can end up spending several days with me. And apart from that, of course, I make custom knives and do all things metal, essentially. So
is knife making pretty much the primary?
Knife making is 100% the primary. Cool. I would say that's like 98%. The rest is like occasionally some metal fabrication work and things like that, but a lot of that's for myself. Yeah. So yeah,
very
definitely
cool.
Knife making.
So give us like a little bit of a background on you personally, kind of where'd you grow up? Where'd you come from? What did like getting into blacksmithing look like for you? Yeah,
so I'm born and raised here in Towns County. Always lived here, especially right here on my family's property in Young Harris. And I went to school in Towns County. Did that up through elementary school a little bit. Actually, my parents pulled me and my sister out, homeschooled us for a couple years. We actually ended up traveling the country in an RV, which was cool. I'm glad they did that in elementary school though, because I would have hated that in high school. But always stayed here. Went back to Towns in middle school. Ended up graduating from Towns, and then kind of along the way, I kind of started the knife making journey when I was about 12, somewhere in there. So I've been at it for a little bit now. Yeah, but always been here.
Very cool. And did you? Was that something that the knife making side of things, was that something that like somebody that you were close with kind of did, or did you just really just pick that up kind of at random?
No, I kind of picked that up at random. So, I mean, a couple things is like, one, I grew out here on the farm, just grew up out here. So kind of being around stuff, like fixing things, working with your hands was just kind of always a custom. And then my mom's dad, so my grandpa, he did a lot of carpentry work. So I did grow up with him in his shop, kind of just watching him build things, make things with his hands. And nobody ever did anything with metal. So that was just me. And a lot of that came from YouTube. Greatest thing ever,
YouTube
right?
University.
YouTube University. And, we'd go to fall festival shows, things like that, where you'd see guys that were blacksmiths, or they sometimes would have an anvil and a forge, something like set up, and they would be making nails, hooks, whatever. And I think I kind of saw that for the first time in a place like that, and it kind of, in my mind was like, oh my gosh, that's the coolest thing ever. So naturally from there, I watched, I think, every video there possibly was on YouTube about the process. And so nobody that I knew did this. It was just me. So
okay. So you say you're pretty much self-taught for the most part. What did the development from kind of like this being a fun thing you were learning to do on the side to like thinking, oh, this might actually be able to be a business move? Like, what did that kind of transition and process look like for you?
So that was a really long process because 12-year-old me had no dream of necessarily doing this as a career. It was just something cool. I was also your standard 12-year-old who was doing about, 5 different activities that I thought were cool, from, sports, just being outside, and then also, of course, something like this. And so it was just for fun. I had managed to convince my parents that it was a good idea for me to have a literal, box of fire and a hammer on hot metal without, hurting myself or something like that. And they were just supportive, right? So they just helped me get set up with that. And it was just a good way for me to have fun as a kid, do something that wasn't, video games essentially. Oh, yeah. And just be able to play with that. But I mean, it was several years. It was a good 4 or 5 before I actually started to, make a little bit of money with that. And that was still honestly on the side because I would have been in high school at that point. Right. And even at that point, it was just kind of for fun. But that is where kind of the business in a way started, would have been right about when I was in high school. Okay. So.
And what did that look like then? Was that like kind of selling made finished products at that point?
So definitely a lot of friends and family just being supportive.
Oh, yeah.
And kind of once I got from, this was just for fun, making crap products essentially that I just thought were cool, to making a little bit of a better product. I did a couple shows like fall festivals, things like that. And, as a 16-year-old, made what I thought was good money. I remember a couple of these shows I went to, I sold out in the first morning and, made a couple grand, whatever. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. I'm like, look what I'm doing. I can do this forever. And, but, I didn't have any money either. So for me, a couple grand was everything. Right. Oh, yeah. And that was my money for the year, essentially. And, but I just kind of kept it as that. I'd make orders for people, having fun, and, got to support my hobby. That was kind of the beauty of all that. Oh, yeah. So, but just having fun mainly. So,
what did those early kind of the, I don't know what you would call that, not trade show, but kind of the arts and crafts fair type of fall festival thing. What do you think that those taught you about the ability to do business?
So it taught me several things, like not necessarily how to run a business, but maybe it gave me an attention to what people were looking for, right? Not everybody was looking for somebody who made the best possible knife, but a lot of it just came down to the story, right? I was a 15, 16-year-old kid that was doing something out of the norm, right, of what every other 15 and 16-year-old kid was doing, right? So that kind of gave me this platform. I was like, oh man, people really like this story essentially of a young guy doing something different, right? And I was kind of like, well, I can kind of use that to my advantage. And with that, there again, it's like in my mind, I wanted to be able to make a really, really good product, but it gave me a better understanding of what's a good product that also sells well, right? Which was not always, swords or big crazy things like that. Sometimes it was more novelty items that, more generic people were just like, hey, that's cool. He's cool. He's young. We want to support him and be able to bring someone home with us that he's made, right? So that was a really, really good starting position for me too. And I got to make personal connections with people. You meet them face to face. It wasn't just over the phone or anything like that. Right. Also helped me develop some better people skills because, in those shows, you're sitting in a booth for a couple days at a time, and that's all you're doing is just talking. And it became really repetitive and kind of mind-numbing in some ways, but it was good. It was good. Yeah. But meeting a lot of people. So.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the people side of business is definitely something that I think a lot of people undervalue is no matter what type of business you're in, even if it's literally making products primarily, you're still in business with interacting with people. There's no digital anything that's gonna replace like the physical person that you actually have to interact with.
I forget where I heard this one time, but somebody basically said every business to a degree is just sales. Yeah. And that's exactly right. So it's just people skills, learning how to talk to them, being somebody's friend, in a way. And then of course from that being able to give them a good product. But yeah, it's sales kind of no matter what you're doing, but yeah, it was helpful to learn that earlier on. Right. Not that it's always easy to talk to anybody and everybody, but learning how to be comfortable with that and, being confident in your product, right? Because if you're not confident, nobody else is. Yeah. So.
And so that was you said that was kind of like the early years. Tell me about the little bit of transition that started to happen into how you ended up in a physical space like this and teaching classes and stuff.
So, like we talked about, that early on was just it was supporting my hobby. It was basically a hobby that was paying for itself. And I did start off in this shop, but it wasn't a shop. It was a pole barn that essentially, if you know about a pole barn, it's just a roof, right? So my original shop was just a little small portion of this area that kind of slowly got brought into. And a lot of that was just kind of a family farm project, with the help of mom and dad, because I couldn't afford to build a shop, no kid could. And so at that point, it was kind of like, hey, I'm making a little money. I can reinvest into my business as far as buying more tools and equipment and things like that. But from 16 to kind of 18, I did get a lot better as far as my abilities to make knives. So that was when I started really looking into like Forged and Fire, right? I knew that I had to be 18 to go on the show, so I kind of just did the best I could from like 16 to 18 because I did try to apply for the show when I was like 16, but I'm super happy they told me like, hey, you got to wait till you're 18 because I was not ready for it when I was 16. So I was kind of just preparing myself for that because it was a dream for me to do that for such a long time. So essentially it was just kind of like, hey, let me get as good at this as I can, and when I turn 18, like I'm going to apply for that. Like I'm going to do it the day, I turned 18. Yeah. So a lot of that was that, coming home, getting better at it, and, daydreaming, honestly, about, could I possibly do this as a career? Is that a thing? Or am I just daydreaming? You know what I mean? Because, I was just making a little bit of money, but, I didn't necessarily know how much money do I need to actually make in order to be able to do it as a job, instead of just a hobby. But yeah, it was just kind of learning and like I said, daydreaming about what it could be. But more importantly, I wanted to figure out how to get on TV because I had been watching that show for the last several years, essentially. Yeah. And so that was just kind of the build up to that point. So
you mentioned Forged and Fire. What did that, for somebody who may not have heard of that show before, tell us a little bit about what that is.
So Forged and Fire is essentially just a competition on knife making. If you've seen any competition cooking show before, like take Chopped for an example, same layout, same platform, but not cooking, just knife making. So 4 contestants come in, they give you a challenge. They say, make this certain kind of knife out of this material and do it in X amount of time. And it's always in a ridiculously short time frame, right? So it's stressful, it's hot, but that's the whole goal of it. It makes for good TV, of course. And then once you're done with that, they test it, right? So there's 3 rounds, 4 contestants, And each round they eliminate somebody, of course, to get down to the final two, and then eventually get a winner. And so, but it's always kind of random, and of course they do their best to try to break your knives and things like that, because it makes it exciting to see. But that's all it is. It's just a knife making competition.
Okay.
So,
and that's that runs on like History Channel?
Yeah, it's on the History Channel. As far as I know, it's still on there. I don't really know if they're doing any more episodes or not, but I mean, you can find it on, whatever, Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, YouTube, all those sorts of things. But I know you can catch reruns on there. So.
Yeah. I actually looked it up. They have a lot of the seasons you can buy the full season on YouTube.
Yeah, I'm sure you can. I know you can buy.
It's behind a paywall, but you can watch they have playlists of the whole thing on YouTube, which is kind of neat. But,
yeah, I know if you want to watch full episodes, I know you can buy it. Mm-hmm. But of course, I mean, they clip everything these days, so you can go through there and watch clips of every single episode if you want to.
Yeah, I was able to find a couple of your rounds on clips on YouTube. Mm-hmm. So, what was that? What was that experience like for you? Kind of wanting to make you made that a goal when you were in high school, was to get on the show. You finally did. How did it go for you? What do you did it live up to the hype of what you were hoping that it would be when you were in high school?
Yeah, I mean, so number one, I was just really ambitious about getting on the show. So like I said, I applied for that on my birthday, which was in March, and day I turned 18. And I didn't get to go on the show until right after I graduated. So I graduated that May. And then I went on the show and filmed in September of that year. So a little bit of time afterwards. And it was cool. I mean, it really was. It was kind of what I expected, truth be told. Stressful. Didn't really know what was going to happen, which is exactly what happened. But part of that for me was it was filmed in Connecticut. Okay. So, I flew up there by myself. It was the first time I'd ever traveled anywhere by myself, so that was a little weird. And of course, get up there, didn't know anybody, and they're like, you're going to this hotel, then you're going to this location, you're filming for this time, so on and so forth. And, you literally have no idea what is going on, so I was just along for the ride. But apart from that, it was very fun. It really was. Other than they give you a small time frame, so you are kind of stressed out about that, I was still doing the same thing that I do, home here, right? Just trying to do the best I could in a small period of time. And, what I was really hoping from that was, number one, to win and really boost my publicity, right? I mean, that was kind of my aspirations, was to get my name out there as much as I possibly could and do well, in hopes that it would kind of launch my business more for me. Well, one of the things that ended up happening was I came in second place, and like I mentioned before, they test these products at the end. And when they test it, it's not just let's see how sharp it is or whatnot. I mean, they are brutal with it, right? They're trying to break it. And so, you know what a gong is, the big cymbal? Mm-hmm. They were beating my sword into one of those, right? So not ideal. And my handle that I had made for the sword ended up cracking. And since the other contestants didn't, I ended up coming in second. Otherwise, I probably would have won, but you can make that decision for yourself.
I think that's probably true.
Well, yeah, you just watch it yourself, because the other guy, he was nice. I liked him. He was cool. So I'm not dishing on him at all. But I was really, really bummed about that, because I felt like since I didn't win, that I just kind of failed at being able to kind of launch myself out there, which turns out was not the case at all. Yeah. I remember once it aired, which was not until April of the next year, I just got flooded with messages and, from social media and whatnot, people finding me on the internet. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And it turns out, I mean, the biggest blessing of it was even though I didn't win, I had portrayed myself well, and they had also portrayed me well via, the power of editing and whatnot. But it helped me out a bunch. I mean, it truly did. And so it did launch me to where I was like, okay, I'm going to make a bit of a go at this, trying to make orders for people and whatnot, because that's exactly what happened. I remember I got a bunch of requests hey, I want you to make me kitchen knives, hunting knives, things like that. And I'm like, of course, I'll do it, which was awesome. I was fresh out of high school. I was in school. I had gone to trade school at North Georgia Tech.
Okay.
And so it was a great position to where I had both time to go to school and also be able to work because I just commuted back and forth to school, right? So it was a awesome situation for both of those there.
Yeah. So was that kind of the instigator for the shift in business from more so product to starting to do more classes and things, or that?
It is not.
No. Okay.
So funny enough, during that time frame where I thought that was going to be the answer that I was looking for, it turns out it wasn't, because knives are cool, don't get me wrong, and handmade knives are expensive, but the product margins are not very good because it is not that expensive to make a knife, but it takes a lot of time, right? So all of a sudden, if I told somebody that this is a $500 knife, but what I didn't disclose is that it took me 50 hours to make it, well, you can do the math. I could have worked someplace else for the same amount of money, right? So I realized kind of in that scenario that I'm like, this is really cool and I have this opportunity, but this is not going to be an opportunity for me to make necessarily a living or a good living at that, right? So with that, I continued to stay in school, and I, of course, still made knives for people. I was making money doing what I liked, and I was in school. I didn't have to go work for somebody else, so I was like, hey, this is a good situation for me to be in right now, but I have a good understanding that this is not necessarily going to be my career, just because it just wasn't working out that way with what I was trying to do. Don't get me wrong, there's avenues, there's people that do that correctly, but it is such a niche market that you got to think everybody that makes knives makes a hunting knife or a kitchen knife, and so does Walmart.
Yeah.
Right? So unless you're doing something that nobody else is doing, you're competing with the world, right? So I took that, put it in my back pocket, and I just kind of persevered through school. I was in school for welding at the time, and I was like, I'm going to be a welder. I like doing it. It was still kind of up my alley, but that was my aspirations of the time. So I just continued going out through school, and even once I finished the welding course, I continued through there, and I actually did heating and air. I did their program, and I also did, I got my CDL while I was there, so I just kind of gave myself a bunch of options of what I could do for work in case one of those didn't end up working out. So I was just kind of filling my basket full of eggs,
Yeah. I feel like a lot of times that's what small business ends up looking like.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're going to throw a bunch of things at the wall and see which one sticks, you know? And you talk about like competition too. I think, that's something that all business owners would be able to relate to.
Yeah.
There's some kind of phrase that I always butcher about the competition being good for people and rising tides raises all ships or something like that. But that's good in its own mentality. But you also have to be self-aware enough to realize like, hey, even though this may be like something specific that I love doing, it may not be the avenue that like I'm going to find the success in either.
Yeah. Well, and some of that for me was just thinking like, okay, I love knife making. But maybe let's find a job that allows me to be able to do what I love as a hobby. Right. And that's why I was looking at welding, because I was like, hey, I do enjoy welding. I realize I'm probably not going to be able to do that here locally. I'll probably have to go someplace else for that. But at least that job can fuel what I enjoy doing on the side. So at the time, that was kind of my thought process with that. But because don't get me wrong, if you look up other knife makers out there, I mean, you can find plenty of knives that sell for thousands upon thousands of dollars, but you don't start there, right? I mean, it's a very small amount of people that want a, $5,000 knife. Don't get me wrong, some people do, but you don't just start there. That takes quite a bit of time and credibility. Not that I didn't have the credibility from being on the show, but I really just don't think I had the time.
Yeah. Do you think that the show really had the business impact that you were hoping it would? Like, do you think you would have made a similar path had you not made it onto the show at all?
No, I don't. One, because the great thing about the show is it gave me more credibility due to the fact of my age. Because, big thing like that, let's just say if I was a contractor, for example, like I'm 25 now, but if I was 18 and a contractor and you said, hey, I want you to build me a house, and then I showed up and you're like, you're the contractor, you'd be like, I don't really know how I feel about that, right? So that gave me good credibility that I think had I not gone onto it, it would have been way more difficult for me to establish that.
So given the opportunity to run it all back, you definitely would go back on the show again.
Oh, for sure. Well, I went on a second time.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I get that question a lot. People are like, oh, would you go back if you had the opportunity? I'm like, I did, and I did it, So that was cool. So a couple things is like, I was still in school, still kind of doing the knives on the side and things like that, and I ended up getting a call one day, and they're like, hey, would you actually like to come back on the show? And I was like, duh, for sure, I'd love to come back on. And so that brought a whole nother pathway in, which I'm kind of jumping the gun there on a couple details, which we'll probably get into in just a second, but for sure, yeah, the show, absolutely, I'd go back on again. Even if they call me up right now, they're like, when do you want to come back? I'd say, sure, of course.
So this is a little bit of a deeper question, but I think it's related really well, is what would you have had to have changed about the way that you were pursuing the business had you not had the opportunity on the show that you did have?
I would have had to essentially, if I wanted to just, of course, still do the knives, I would have had to kind of redo the model of it to where either if I was going to be making strictly handmade knives, that they would have needed to be at a much higher price point, realizing that would have probably driven down some of the amount of sales that I had done, or tried to structure it in such a way where it was more along the lines of mass manufacturing. Because with mass manufacturing, of course, you can get a cheaper product and get more out there. That would have essentially been one of the two ways that I could have tried to restructure that without trying to reinvent the wheel, basically, because it's kind of hard to reinvent a knife, something that's been around for the 1,000+ years, you know what I'm saying? It would have been very difficult. It really would have, because, I only knew how to do it that way at that point, right? And that was kind of difficult for me to try to think about, like, especially with the mass manufacturing. Well, that involves a lot of equipment and people, and a lot deeper pockets than I had at the time, so it would have been extremely difficult.
Yeah,
for sure.
Were the things that you learned on the show, do you think that was more valuable in the craft of what you were doing, or was it something else? Maybe something about business, maybe it was something about marketing. What do you think was like the most valuable takeaway that you had after your experience on the show?
Well, I mean, a couple of things that are interesting is, like, number one, like, being and participating on the show itself didn't necessarily give me any sort of information that I didn't already have. Like, as far as making knives and things like that go, it didn't necessarily, I didn't learn anything other than maybe how to do it a little faster, cut a couple corners to do it a little quicker. The biggest thing for me was just, like, there again, the credibility aspect of it, because when people watch that, they no longer just saw a young guy that was making knives, right? Because to a degree, anybody could get into this if they wanted to, buy a couple pieces of equipment and start making knives, right? But it gave me the credibility of, okay, not only does he make knives, he did participate in a show. And with that, even though he didn't win, he did, at least get to the finals if they had never even watched the episode. And if you just hear, oh, he was on Forge and Fire, he must be pretty good. And I'm not saying that just from this. It's just what I've heard from every single person who's come out here and talked to me before. They're like, oh, man, we saw that you were on Forge and Fire, and we had to come check you out. So for me, it was just like, okay, credibility is kind of everything, or at least having something that people can relate to in a degree, because there again, it's like, oh man, we love watching Forged in Fire. We watch reruns. It just stays on the TV all the time. It's one of our favorite shows. It's really cool. And, we just would love to know more about your process because of that, So even if I hadn't been on Forged in Fire, I would have, with that takeaway, tried to somehow figure out how I could get that credibility. Right. And another thing too, the publicity from that show, you can't pay for that.
Right.
That was free exposure that no amount of money I feel like could touch.
Yeah.
You couldn't pay for the best marketing out there to get the same amount of attention from
national TV.
Exactly. So that was just, it's hard to beat national TV. So that, I think for me, that was kind of my big takeaway.
Okay. Especially, I feel like the national aspect really is beneficial when you come from Young Harris, Georgia.
Yeah, Young Harris is not national, at all. Maybe Blue Ridge Mountains are a little bit known, but nobody knows about Young Harris, Georgia, unless you're trying to figure out where to go to college, because there's a small school over here that people know about sometimes, but there's nothing in Young Harris at all.
Speaking of that, why do this here? Like, what was it about? Either maybe it was staying on the family property or something, but like, what was the reasoning for deciding to build the business that you've built, like right here specifically?
So you're exactly right. There would really be no reason to think about putting it here because there's nothing here, but that's also kind of what is the beautiful thing about it, is it almost kind of makes it a little bit of an attraction. So a couple things was one, yes, it was, my family's property. I really didn't have any desire to leave here. So kind of a couple things that were nice is there again, when I was growing up and we did a lot of traveling, I kind of got to see the world for myself. So I never really had that desire to move. I never had the desire that I needed to go see and experience something else. I knew that I liked it here. So that was one thing that made me want to stay here. And I also kind of started to realize as I was growing up that like we get a lot of tourism here. There's a lot of people that come here for our seasons. Maybe not so much wintertime, but spring, summer, fall. We get a bunch of people. I know Towns County, especially in the summertime, our population almost quadruples. You know what I'm saying? And so, man, that's a huge opportunity in itself. You could go try in something like that I do here to go try to set it up in Gatlinburg, where there's all sorts of people, but then it just kind of becomes mainstream as to where, having my shop on my family's farm that, we've been out here I've always lived here, not necessarily that we're multi-generations or anything like that, but it makes it more natural for a lot of people. It's not like I said, it's not a mainstream business that's on every corner. It's an experience in itself just to come to this area, let alone do something that's naturally fitting in the area as well. So that is kind of why I stayed here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this will be a fun one. Do you remember the first paid class that you taught? And what was that experience like?
So real quick before I answer that question, do you want me to explain now about how the classes got started, or do you want me to talk about the first class?
Yeah, that'd be good. Go ahead and talk about the transition. Yeah, I'll let you run with it. So however the classes came about, I'll let you speak to that.
Because it's kind of a fun story.
Yeah.
So before my second episode of Forged in Fire, I was at this point in school, I was doing the heating and air program, and I'd had a little bit of a thought by this point because I'd finished up the welding. I knew that with welding I would have to travel, but heating and air could be done anywhere, especially here, and I did like being here. So I went to school for that, but in the same time, I started working for a heating and air company. Part of my idea was if I can get licensed in a short amount of time as possible, then I can start, of course, working quicker. So I tried to kill two birds with one stone, which a lot of people will know about how the whole licensing around here with that sort of stuff works. But from my understanding, it could be different, but it was like 4 years. A year of schooling would count to that time frame, and if you worked at the same time, 2 years could be knocked out in 1 year, right? So I was doing that, and in about a month, I realized that I despised heating and air. and I hated everything about it. One, because I didn't really understand it all that well, and I didn't really enjoy it. So the company that I was working with, they're nice guys and everything, but they actually ended up firing me from that job. So I'd never been fired before. No, I didn't do anything wrong, but they just said they didn't need me, which probably means I probably wasn't very good at my job. But anyway, I came home and I was just talking to my parents. They're like, "Why are you home early?" I'm like, "I got fired," And so, which was a blessing in its own way because I did not enjoy it. We had a family friend there that we were just kind of talking like, well, what are you gonna do, now? And I'm like, well, I don't really know. I'm gonna, of course, continue going to school, but it's kind of up in the air. I'll just continue to do knives on the side and things like that. And they said, well, have you ever thought about doing classes? I was like, it's crossed my mind, but I never saw it as something that would be a common thing. I could see in my mind where maybe once a month or every other month, there might be a weekend where a couple people come out and do a class, something like that. But I'm like, man, people, I don't see a scenario where somebody wants to come out here and have to spend 2 days with me doing something, making a full-fledged knife. She's like, well, what if it's not 2 days? Is there something simpler? And I was like, yeah, there's simpler ways. She goes, well, perfect. There's your answer there. Second, she goes, do you need any more equipment? Do you have to spend any money to make this happen? And I was like, no. She's like, could you do 2 people, maybe 3 people at once? And I was like, well, yeah, I could. She's like, well, then there's your answer. Why don't you try it? She goes, it's not going to hurt anything. It literally doesn't cost you a dime. I was like, okay. So we brainstormed that afternoon and kind of just thought about what that would look like. And it was going to be making a knife from a railroad spike, something that took somebody basically half a day to do. And so I remember making that kind of post essentially, and I actually I did that through Airbnb, believe it or not, through their experiences, and I posted it out there. I was just kind of, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
And basically about a week after that, somebody had actually booked one. I was like, oh, no shot, And so now to answer your question about the first class. So it was a father and son. I remember they came, and I had it listed that it was a 4-hour class, right? So don't get me wrong, I could make a railroad spike knife, no problem. But trying to explain that to somebody was very weird. And I had, in my mind, 100 times over thought about, how am I going to explain this and not make it sound too complicated, not over-explain it. And they came in, they were super nice. I remember telling them that this was not my first class, because I didn't want to make it seem like I was a newbie at this, which I was such a newbie at trying to teach a class. But it took the full 4 hours, and I probably, helped them with like half of the knife, as far as doing it for them, because I struggled so bad with I saw them doing something wrong, and I was like, oh, let me fix that for you and whatnot. And at the end of the day, they loved it. They had a great time. But I was like, man, that was hard. That was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And it took up the entire time to do that. So it was a lot. That first one was a huge learning experience for me in itself, right? Especially trying to bring somebody in and show them what to do. So it was weird, but it was a stepping stone.
Yeah.
For sure. But that's how the classes got started.
Okay. And so how long after that initial class did you wrap up with school and kind of make the turn into being more of a full-time thing with this?
So that first class happened at the end of July, right? So I had been essentially fired from that heating and air job for about a month or so at this point. So I decided to continue with the heating and air program. And then there again, kind of right at the beginning of August is when I got the phone call from Forge and Fire asking me to come back. All right. So went and did that. By that point, I had gotten probably about 15 or 20 of these classes actually knocked out. It kind of just started to snowball for me there with the classes. They picked up pretty instantaneously almost, which was pretty cool. So did that, and I knew that basically from the filming to the airing date, it was probably going to be somewhere in the neck of the woods of the spring before it aired, that I was just going to keep rolling with the punches as far as with the classes. And I continued going to school. So school wrapped up for me, that heating and air program, about the same time that the show appeared. More publicity, believe it or not, right? And started getting more bookings. And I knew that I wanted to, like I said, get my CDL license before I was done with school, because my dad, smart man, he's like, go ahead and do whatever schooling you can now, because once you start working, you'll never go back.
Yeah.
And he was 100% right. So I ended up doing that program at night, the CDL, and it was only like it's like a 7 or 8 week program. So for 2 months, every day throughout the week, I would work during the day, I'd do my classes, and then I would go to school at night, which, this was in Clarksville, Georgia. It was about an hour away. So those were long days.
Yeah.
I'd start my classes at 8 in the morning at that time, and I'd get home at like 10:30 at night. And I'd do that Monday through Thursday. They didn't have class on Fridays. But so for me, like when I started doing the classes, that was a huge turnaround for me, because I started making, what I would have considered to be actual money at that time with the classes. And that was, at that point for me, was my eye opener of like, maybe this is my avenue of what allows me to do this as a career. So I did that, like I said, through school. Once I finished school up, I just kept doing the classes, and that has been ever since then that I've been doing the classes. So the classes have just only gotten busier since then, essentially. But that was the key takeaway after that second appearance of Forge and Fire. It boosted me even more, and the classes just kept compounding to where it went from being a once a week to twice a week to 3 times to 4 times to 5 times to 6 times a week, so on and so forth.
Wow. So you talked briefly, we talked a little bit about like the location and being here, and how it kind of is it is a touristy area, but it's not necessarily like a big name touristy area. What do you think that like maybe the business benefits from being in a smaller town versus being in a Gatlinburg or a Chattanooga, or what do you think like are some things that people maybe don't realize about like this area that are actually a benefit to it being smaller?
A lot of things, honestly. Biggest thing for me that I eventually figured out with my business is people were not coming to learn from me about how to make knives. I was not the best knife maker, not the best knife making instructor. I'm still not. But I offer something, and so does everybody that lives around here, that nobody else does, which is the location. So it offers an incredible experience. That's the whole reason why people want to come up here, is for the experience of the area. We have, honestly, one of the best places in the world as far as scenery goes. You got beautiful mountains, beautiful lakes, hiking, incredible seasons that people literally come from all over the world. I've got a map in there full of pins of where everybody has come from that have done a class with me.
That's cool.
And it's everywhere. Quite literally. You can see where most people generally come from just from a demographics perspective. But I am able to offer somebody an experience that they can't get anywhere else. Somebody can take a knife making class, and there's a knife making class in Pigeon Forge, but you're going to be there with 1,000 other people, and it's not kind of the same thing that I offer. Most of that class they do for you. You're just kind of getting to experience it. But it's to where here you're on a farm, you're making a knife, you're in a cool location, and it's peaceful, it's quiet, other than when I'm making a ridiculous amount of noise, hammering and grinding and whatnot. But we offer an experience that nobody else can get in this area.
For sure. What kind of responsibility do you feel personally like towards your customers that are coming out here for a class?
Experience, especially. Everybody talks about the Chick-fil-A experience, just give them the same thing, right? Make essentially every person the hero of their own story, right? I'm stealing that from a book, Story Brand, if you guys have ever read it before. But that's the truth. You're able to give somebody that experience, that story that they can't get anywhere else. So, like I said, the knife making, that's just a part of that story.
Yeah.
Me, I'm just a little bit a part of that story. But they're doing something that they can't do necessarily at home or nearby, unless, of course, they do live nearby. But that's essentially it. They just can't get that whole surrounding from anywhere but here.
For you personally, and as you've built the business, what would you say are your like key uncompromising values that you focus on?
Like just as far as with the business?
Yeah, either you personally or like what the business's values are for their customers, you know?
Yeah, so I mean, as far as from the business perspective, is as of course, every customer isn't equal. Of course, no matter what they're paying me, everybody is here to get that same experience, right? So what I give them, the information I give them, how I treat them, of course, is always going to be the same. Now, apart from that, as far as my core values and whatnot, especially with business too, is, faith. I'm faith-based as well as most people are around here and whatnot. And sometimes, that's tricky when you get new people in here every day from all across the country and the world and whatnot. That's not always a easy platform. So sometimes it's never heated, but being able to share conversations with people, whether it's about faith or politics and things like that, to be able to give them a place where it's like, hey, not everybody around here is crazy like you may seem to think or something like that, right? Same way we think that maybe people in other places are crazy. But, being able to have neutral conversations, because you ever hear about people talk about how like the salon shop, they should be therapists because of all the information and stuff they hear. Well, you'd be surprised of what it's like here as well. I've heard stories and things about people's lives that, sometimes I feel like I am supposed to be somebody's therapist when I have no idea how to answer their questions, But being neutral grounded, and if I am in a position to where I feel like I can give them my 2 cents on a conversation comfortably without making them feel pressured or anything like that, I do my best to keep it that way, but it's not always easy, I'd love to tell everybody about the Lord, which I do to a degree, but in a respectful way.
Yeah.
So
every business is a people business.
it is, absolutely.
Talked about that earlier. Was there ever a time that you thought that this might not work? Anything in particular, like maybe you had like a super bad class, or times were super slow and you were wondering if you were going to continue on?
I mean, the biggest of that would have been when I was kind of right after the first appearance of Forged and Fire, like I said, when I was just trying to make products to sell. That for me was the one time especially that I was like, this is probably not going to work at all. And don't get me wrong, there's been days with classes that I'm like, golly, that was just kind of rough. I've never had a bad class experience, but part of the things with this and it being a people business is I get to meet every make and model of person, whether that's good or bad, right? And like I said, I've never had any bad situations, but I've definitely had some what felt uncomfortable and uneasy, or just difficult would be the better way to say it, that I was like, man, if it was like this every day, I would rethink things. But it's few and far between, which I think everybody can agree to. Everybody is going to have people that sometimes make business difficult, right? But it's outweighing the pros and the cons. And the pros have always outweighed the cons for me.
Yeah.
So
what are some of the things that like kind of keep you going when things get hard, when the times get tough? Like what about it keeps you coming back?
I mean, a lot of reasons. Number one, I'm literally doing what I love. My job fuels my hobby, and my hobby is my job. You know what I mean? So that aspect, and realizing that there's never going to be another situation for me where, number one, I'm going to get to do something that I really enjoy and be able to do that at home, right? So, of course, everybody's dream would probably be to live somewhere you love and make money while doing that, but that's not always the case for everybody. So a lot of that is for me. Of course, there are days that it feels like work, but 6 days out of the week, it's just fun, you know? And so I think for me, the biggest thing to realize is just like, hey, I am extraordinarily blessed to be able to make money, live where I do, and all of my community, family, friends are all right here as well, which that's another huge blessing. You know, I have lots of people to support me, you know, lift me up, talk me through, help me dream, help me envision, you know. So even though I did this myself, you know, that's not to say that I didn't have help. You know, I had lots of help, lots of guidance, especially of what to do, you know, what decisions not to make, you know, the big decisions, you know, like, hey, you know, not necessarily running a business, but what it takes to run the business and how to do it correctly. You know, I didn't have to necessarily just guess at that. You know, my father, he's ran a business his entire life and whatnot, and other friends and family that we have done the same thing. So like I said, some of these things I did not have to guess on, which was a huge blessing. I didn't necessarily have to learn everything the hard way, but I had to learn a lot of it the hard way for sure, you know, but it was very helpful and very encouraging. So
we'll kind of start to wrap up a little bit with this one is, what is like maybe the next step in business for you? And if do you hope that this business like would outlive you in some way? And what does like legacy kind of look like for you?
Well, I always have been a big dreamer about what this can look like, and I get a lot of that from my father because he's a big daydreamer, and we talk about things like that a lot. But I definitely have some aspirations with Ledford Works in the business here to not only continue to do classes, but I have gotten so busy with the classes now that it's a daily thing. I mean, I do classes every single day. So part of that growing will be to expand on those classes in itself. In the upcoming future, I do plan to actually build another shop on the property as well, and actually we'll convert this into a different style of shop to be able to offer more classes. So part of the goal is to bring in more people to where I can, like I say, do other types of classes, give it a little bit of variety, but still on the same premise, as well as make it an even cooler experience for people to come up here. And so that's a lot of what that aspiration as far as growing is going to look like. But as far as, you know, legacy, I will do this as long as I possibly can, you know, and outliving me, you know, that's honestly a question for a future generation, you know, because I don't know, I don't have any kids or nothing like that, you know, but because part of the thing is I would never sell it, you know, on family property. I would never sell it to somebody else or something like that to where they could continue to do it, because then it would take away the property, right? And I plan on being here and overtaking this property one day, you know, for sure, if the Lord allows it. But, you know, so I don't know. That's a question for 45-year-old me, you know, not 25-year-old me. Yeah. So anyway, I don't know, but I'm definitely excited to see.
Very cool. Well, thanks for coming on. Thanks for having us here and letting us record, and just hoping that this podcast we're putting together hopefully be something kind of cool for the community. And, you know, obviously you have some more publicity than maybe some other businesses in town might. And so part of what we're trying to do too is bring some new businesses to people's attention. Hopefully people hear what you had to say and they're like, I want to go make a knife. That'd be cool.
Come on.
You know? Come on. So I'm hoping that we can put something together that the community can kind of get behind, and kind of celebrate the hard work and dedication of the people that have been putting in the hard work and building something here locally. So just appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll catch you on another episode, and maybe we'll loop back in a few years.
Yeah,
and you'll have
absolutely.
You'll have a good answer for the legacy.
Yeah, right. Maybe we'll know a little something different by then. But no, I really appreciate you, you know, asking me about doing this. This was a lot of fun. You know, I've never done a podcast before, so this is really cool. Something different. I like it though.
Very cool. Well, thanks for tuning in. We will catch you on the next episode.